I don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know if this is the right time for you to hear this, but I will say this with as much conviction as I feel it in my being right now. Until you grieve, you shall not pass. Until you grieve, you shall not pass. And I understand that that statement may come off somewhat condemning or ultimatum-ish, and it's not something I'm ever willing to budge on because of the work I've done for myself and what I've seen in other people throughout my life. And it's not a statement that I say lightly or something that I say, you need to follow these rules or else. Until you grieve, you shall not pass is a statement that essentially means until you deal with it, you cannot see the other side of it. And if we were to look at grief or confronting an issue or our feelings on something as essentially a door with a giant wall built around it, we can make a pretty decorated space on the other side of that wall without ever going through that door. We can set a whole life up on the other side of that door and never grieve, never go through it. Actually, I'll give you this, I'll give you one more. We can live an entire lifetime facing the other direction of that door, of dealing with the grief, the loss, the void, whatever it is that we have going on that we have yet to deal with. We can make a life looking the other direction. And in this video, I'm gonna give you some support and help and just very, very tip of the iceberg advice on how to deal with that door, how to approach grief. Now, everybody grieves differently. This is what I've discovered from being the son of a clinical oncology nurse specialist, from being the son of a black man in Detroit who grew up in the 60s and 70s in Detroit and saw a lot of loss and a lot of death. And I think anybody, just even without those two parents, that's my circumstances and scenario. I think anybody, just with any circumstance, has dealt with grief or loss. And I don't think it depends on your economic status or really anything. But the point is, those are my particular specific situations to me. And I say all that to say my approach to grief is, my processing of it is going to be different than yours, is different than theirs, different than theirs. But when we look at until you grieve, you shall not pass, the idea is you have to understand not what passing through the door is, but you have to understand what the thing is that you've been avoiding and why you've been avoiding it. Because a lot of us can make pretty curated and decorated and seemingly pretty lives without even approaching the thing that we're grieving. And once we understand that we've either created this blind spot, we've created this whole life to never really approach this blind spot, or it's just been unannounced to us. I remember the story of a man who fought in Vietnam, came back, and didn't have a bout of PTSD until he was 80 something or 90 something. They thought that he would never have any form of PTSD, and he had an absolute meltdown, I think around the age of 80 something. And the body keeps the toll at all times, and we cannot, you can't outkick the universe. You're just not gonna do it. And that's one thing on this channel I'm just not willing to budge on. Like I'll say many times, I'm like, it's up to you, whoop-de-whoop. But for this, I just don't mess about not doing the work. So if there is grief to be done, if there's tears to be had, if there's a process to mourn the loss, I will forever be an advocate of that, because it is something that we allow ourselves to do, or we prevent ourselves to do. Grief is an opportunity. It really is. And it's until you go through that door, we might get to what's on the other side of that door, but until you get to that door, you are building a life around an entire blind spot and essentially a plausible deniability that, well, I don't have to deal with that because I can just X, Y, Z. So the first step to dealing with grief is acknowledging what there is to be grieved. Somebody that's passed on, a moment where you felt wronged, a moment where you felt violated, and maybe a moment where you saw somebody violated, or you heard of, something bad happening, or something that's happened in your family where you just feel like nothing's been atoned for. And it's not that somebody needs justice or anything like that, that you need to be the keeper of justice in the family, but it is to say, you just have to look at it. That's the first step. We talk about this in forgiveness all the time. Forgiveness, although simple as an act, it is not easy to approach. So like turning a light switch on for somebody may seem simple, but somebody who has possibly some form of fear of light switches, dare I say, their approach to a light switch is going to be entirely different. You petting a dog seems simple, but somebody who has a fear of dogs, not so simple. So now, it's not easy. It is a simple act, but it's not easy. So the approach to grieving, the idea is that it is simple to point at it and be like, there it is, it's right there. It's not easy. It is not easy. You can acknowledge it and then be like, whoa, we do not talk about that. No. And it's because many times it makes people feel uncomfortable. And we end up building a life around comfort and dodging that discomfort. But those are two different things, I should say. We can build a life around what makes us comfortable and a life around avoiding what makes us uncomfortable. And I always love to really discern those two. Looking good is not the same as not looking bad. They overlap, but they are two different things. They overlap in places. When you point out the thing that you're grieving, when you name it, when you point it out, when you find that and you say, this is what this is, what you do is you essentially take the power back for yourself. What we face disappears, what we resist persists. So if we don't face it, it just grows. It grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until we deal with it, until we go to therapy, or as the Reed says, until we talk to the lady. I love that term. On this podcast, the Read that I listen to, they say, you better go talk to the lady, which means you should go to therapy. It's so many times until we've gone to therapy or just simply talk to somebody about it, it will stay there and it just persists, it grows. So pointing out the grief, pointing out the point, like just looking at it and saying, it's right there. It's not only acknowledging, for some people it may feel that they're acknowledging a vulnerability and saying, oh no, I'm pointing out my weak spot. When in reality, you're pointing out that you're a human and that you have the strength to actually point it out and say, there it is right there. That's the button. That's the thing I need to deal with. And in my experience, until I pointed out the things that I needed to deal with, which was a handful, I was going nowhere. I mean, I would be able to ascend professionally, like I would get by, and I know that I'm very good at my craft of acting and music and writing, but that was the extent of it. I could sing somebody else's song, I could act in somebody else's movie, writing my own work. It wasn't coming from a place of authenticity until I dealt with the things I needed to deal with. And once I did that, everything changed. I mean, that's a video for another time. My writing got impeccably better from then on. It was wild. And my acting got different because it was from a place that was of a life experience of knowing what inauthenticity was and then what authenticity is and being like, oh, we can navigate this whole world. So pointing out the grief was showing up for myself. And when you point out the grief, you're showing up for yourself as well. And maybe some other people around you too. Until you grieve, you shall not pass. And when you point out the grief, you create the possibility of passing through. And the idea of passing through is not the goal. The idea is that we go through life and we're able to acknowledge our humanity. And in doing that, we're able to acknowledge other people's humanity. And in doing that, we're able to see that we're really able to empathize with a lot of things around us and not carry all this calcified worry, regret, resentment, whatever that may be. So when we point out the grief, the next step would be to take a look at yourself and say, how do I process this? Now, this is where we leave this door kind of wide open, no pun intended, to the door we mentioned in the beginning, but you have to look at how you're going to process it. But when I say process it, you have to actually process it. I'm not talking about you just write it down and put it in the middle of a notebook and say, yes, I've dealt with it. No. Processing it means something that you may carry for the rest of your life. That's okay. That is absolutely okay. Carrying processed grief for the rest of your life is very different than carrying unprocessed grief for the rest of your life. And trust me, unprocessed grief will be on your back for the rest of your life. That is one promise I can promise you. And that's just the way that it works. And until we process it, it will choose to pop up in many different ways and manifest itself in different behaviors, in different ways of expressing itself. It will happen in a lot of different ways, to the point that it will start to take us over. And that's where we run into a lot of resistance, a lot of stress, a lot of worry, a lot of cortisol levels shooting up, because we're giving the wheel and the reins to this thing we have yet to grieve. And we resist it in many ways, and it can come in avoidance, it can come in pendulum theory. This thing happens, so I swing all the way to the side and totally live a different life, don't even approach that. It can manifest itself in so many different ways, and it can basically wreak havoc on our lives. And I try to be vague in this because the havoc in your life will be different than the havoc in my life, but it's going to be havoc one way or another. So point out the grief. 2, what is the process that you're willing to take? What is the path you're willing to take to process that grief? Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's an intervention. Maybe it's approaching a person. Maybe it's confronting somebody. Maybe it's writing it down, starting a journal, and then keeping a log of how you feel. Either way, what is that process going to be? What is that process going to be? And this is a lot. This is a topic that we could make into many videos, and maybe we will, but I just wanted to brush up on this right now, since this time that I'm making this video, there seems to be a lot of grief going on communally and globally as well. And it's how do we process that? And once we've pointed out the grief, once we've established our path to process the grief, the last thing that I can give you from my life experience on how to deal is that, oh man. We are able to be, what you'll find after that, and this isn't about going through the door, you will find a kindness for yourself that you may not have ever experienced before. And it's not coming from anybody else. This is all inner work. You may find a grace for yourself that you've never had. Oh man. And really what you do is you find a friend in yourself. And I think that's so powerful because for me, not getting to the other side, I mean, I don't even know if I'm on the other side of some things that I've grieved, but being a friend of myself allowed me to be just so much better of a brother, a son, a grandson, a nephew, just a community member. It allowed me to be a lot of other things in a very heightened and better way that I never thought was possible. I thought like literally some of my familial connections, that was it. That's all. That's the only place it's ever gonna go. It's not gonna get any better than that. And there's a whole other world out there. It really is, and I'm still exploring it. So I really can't report back to you too much on that, because once I became an advocate for myself and a friend of myself after processing through grief, then it just helped me be a friend to other people who are going through it. And the crazier part is that my language changed. Not only in my language and my behavior changed, even having like discussions about other people, like where I would usually use like meritocratic language and be like, oh, well, you know that, blah, 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 blah. You know, like use like condemning language, like very passively condemning, like not like that person is a bad person. You know, I don't know if I was ever in that mode, but the thing was I would be able to use just like unmarked terms and be like, well, it sounds like that's how that person's dealing with that. Yeah, I wonder what the next step is for him. And I didn't I didn't shoulder anything from any other situations. It was so wild because it was like, oh, wow, this is a new way to be. And when we look at past videos in this channel, be, do, have, I was having a new way to be. Definitely, I was going about life differently, and then I had different things. And also, I didn't have certain things as well. Like I had full permission to just not deal with certain stuff, and like some connections ended very abruptly. Here's a wild part: when you start going to therapy and you have like a connection with somebody, just like that tells you everything that you need to know about your former self, not about them, just about the former version of you, and then the version of you going forward, and what that's going to be and what you want that to be. And I think that's so beautiful because you're now an advocate for yourself, and you have promoted yourself in the You Corporation. Hi, it's the You Company, and you get to promote you. Only when you're ready for it. And I think one of the big, to give you a story at the end of this, once I faced I'll give you this one, yeah. Okay. My grandfather died when I was in 5th grade. And this is actually quite remarkable now that I think about it. My grandfather passed away when I was in 5th grade. And throughout 5th grade, I just kind of sat at my desk and I was like, oh, well, whatever. Went to his funeral, you know, people were crying. I was like, well, this is pretty ridiculous. 6th, 7th, 8th grade pass, 9th grade in high school, 10th grade. And mind you, I quit. My grandfather played the trombone. I played the trombone up until 8th grade. And then I was just like, I don't want to do this. I want to hang out with my friends. I don't want to do music. And so I then quit music, quit doing trombone. And then in 9th grade, I think I got back into it. 10th grade, I definitely got back into it. I was in the band. And then 11th grade, it was 10th or 11th grade, and I was in the library. I'll never forget this. I was at the library in high school, and this whole wave came over me, and I was like, wow, what's going on? I felt so emotional, and I just got overwhelmed, and I started just crying, just bawling so hard that I had to like go in the corner of the like library and just like, or I think go in like a study room and just like wail, weeping. And I was just like, oh my God, what's going on? And I'm just wailing here and wailing. And the only thing I could think of was my grandfather. And I had never dealt with that at all. Not in the slightest bit. And the way that I worked with the trombone was my relationship to music, was my relationship to my grandfather. It was all overlapped. They weren't directly connected, but they were all overlapping pretty heavily. And once I grieved my grandfather's passing, I then developed a relationship to music that I've never gone back on. I've been a musician ever since then. Like I was doing music before then, but I began writing music after that. I was writing songs in the basement with the trombone. And something opened up in me that gave me something opened up that just showed me the other side of me that was already there. And this is the crazy part. When you open the door, when you begin to grieve, you begin to navigate into places of you that are already there. This is nothing being created. All this stuff is already there in you. You have all these amazing, cool, just fantastic things inside of you that when you start to like deal with it and process things, they're like, all right, cool, you take the elevator up, or cool, You get to go through the door into like the field. You know, I don't picture it like a building or like a club, something like that. But I look at it as almost like just a giant wall. You open it up and then boom, you just go into the next field of recess, and you're just like, oh man, recess, we're out here. Even more games and like more space and cool things to work with. And until I processed my grandfather's passing, I was not able to get to that part, that place of creativity for me, that place of creation for me. So that is my small minutia bit of advice on dealing with grief and what happens when you approach it. And there's many moments in my life where I've approached it, and I'm sure I'll make more videos on that in another time. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. And the parting thing I can say to you, I'm not saying good luck or anything like that. Even if you don't deal with the grief, just know that there is amazing stuff in you. Like, it's all there. It's already there. Like, there's nothing you need to like grab from the outside and start like, you know, putting on you to make you this amazing human. It's already there. And when we start doing the work, a lot of those doors open up. So there we are. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.